Hello and welcome to the latest oddschecker betting podcast. This time we're focusing on day 3 of the Welcome to York Ebor Festival, and it of course features Golden Pal, the exciting American raider who goes in the Coolmore Nunthorpe Stakes, and superstar Sayer Stradivarius, who bids to regain the winning thread in the Lonsdale Cup at 225. I'm once again joined by oddschecker's resident tipster Andy Holding and Rory Delargy. And chaps, we're filming this on Thursday, just reflecting on the Juddmonte International. Mishriff was a winner, tipped up by yourself, Rory. What did you make of the race in general?
There obviously one or two disappointments in behind, and it's a little bit disappointing that Love doesn't seem to have trained on as well as expected from 3 to 4. But to win a race like the International by 6 lengths, you've got to be something pretty special. And Mishriff's had excuses for a couple of defeats this year. He's looked an absolute superstar before. The one issue we had with him is he hadn't shown it in the UK. He'd been globetrotting, running in Saudi Arabia for obvious reasons in Maidan, but he finally showed what an absolute world beater he was on English soil by winning that race by 6 lengths. And while you can go through the beaten horses and proffer some kind of excuse for them, I don't think any of them would have been good enough to beat Mishriff on the day.
And Andy, just your reflection on the race. Obviously, as Rory touched on, it's a bit of a shame that Love doesn't seem to be the same horse she was last year.
No, although we've never really got her running the kind of time figures that Mishriff and one or two of the better Group 1 horses, the older males that are around in the last 2 seasons. So, to be honest, yeah, it wasn't really that much of a disappointment for me. I wasn't going in there expecting fireworks from Love. She's arguably run to somewhere near the kind of figures she's been running in the past. I just think that's the level she is.
Mm-hmm.
And Mishriff was just so deadly on the dam, and I don't know what his time figures. We haven't actually done it yet, but I'd imagine it'll be close to something around the best that we've got so far this season. I think he dipped under standard by 2.5 seconds, which is a testament to his ability. He just kept quickening, didn't he, all the way down the straight? I mean, he just kept finding, and it was a referee stopped the contest job, wasn't it, inside the last furlong? Very rarely do you get a race of that nature won by 6 lengths. So he's very much back in the big time, isn't he, Mishriff?
And just the final thing, just reflecting on yesterday's action in particular, was there anything that stood out for you in terms of, was there any bias at the track, anywhere that looked better in terms of ground than other places? What kind of stood out for you on the opening day?
Well, I was playing golf yesterday afternoon, so I've only actually watched the replays this morning. I listened to a couple of commentaries, and at the time the horses I'd backed. I think you probably wanted to be sort of more middle to far side, just based on what we saw on the straight track. Horses that were held up too far back didn't really get into it either. I think the pace held up in general. Don't know if Rory's go along with that.
I'd agree with that.
Whether that'll pan out over the next few days is obviously open to debate. So I think we'll get more of a guide with 2 days worth of data, if you like, rather than just one. But if there was a 20 odd run of field on the straight track, the last thing what place I'd want to be is still 20, 21 and 20. I think you want to be sort of no worse than 15 across to, or even over towards the far side.
Roy, do you have anything to add in terms of that?
No, so I mean, in fairness, there were 1 or 2 who were showing speed towards the near side who ran to form. I suppose in the end, I think he finished about 5th or 6th, didn't he? Jawal in the opener. I thought he really caught the eye, and I thought for a second he was going to win that race, but he was probably drawn too high in the end. But he did look like he was going to get into contention. It was just in the last half furlong that Peter died. But yeah, as Andy says, just because it panned out in a certain way on the first day at York, half the issue with York is sometimes you'll have a meeting where there's a really strong bias, be that in terms of pace or draw, and that actually helps punters out because you know that you can rely on that the following day. York's one of those tracks where theoretically it's very fair, and you seem to see a bias the first day, and the second day you could see that turned on its head. So don't be relying on the patterns you saw on the first day holding up through the rest of the week. The other thing I would say is the ground seems, given the going stick is less under 7, and they said they've had no need to water because of how much rain there was in July. It was riding very much on the quick side, I thought. as you can tell from the time of the International, for example. And I thought one or two. Well, I think what we'll see is potentially some of the soft ground horses coming out today and tomorrow, unless it rains. And the more I look at the weather forecast, the more it seems that the rain at York is going to arrive after racing on Saturday. So that might see fields get decimated.
Great, thank you very much for that, both. And just before we go on to Friday's action, just let me point you in the direction of the oddschecker site and app. It's the best place to compare odds, extra places and offers between the bookmakers, and you'll also get free tips from Andy and many more. So let's start off with the 225 from York on Friday afternoon, and that's his Stradivarius bid to regain the winning thread as he runs in the Weatherbys Hamilton Lonsdale Cup Stakes over just further than 2 miles live on ITV. Stradivarius is the current 6-5 favourite as he looks for a third win in this race from the last 4 years. Trueshan is 9-4 for Hollywood and Alan King. Spanish Mission for William Buick and Andrew Balding is 11-4. Stratum for Ryan Moore and Woody Mullins is 12-1, and the Grand Vizier is the 40-1 outsider for Richard Kingscote and Ian Williams. Just before we delve into the race itself, chaps, what have you made of Stradivarius so far this year, Rory, in terms of his performance in the Gold Cup, and whether you still think he's the force he was of old?
I don't think he's quite as good as he was, and I think connections are also beginning to think that as well to some degree. And they're talking retirement for him if you know, and he's a 7-year-old now. It's remarkable that he's been at the top for so long since his you know, his place in St Ledger as a 3-year-old, won the Goodwood Cup. So he's been at the very top of his game for a long time, and that's very unusual in this game. So it's only natural that he should be just showing signs of wear and tear now as a 7-year-old. Frankie got lambasted for his ride in the Gold Cup. I don't think Frankie did nearly as much wrong as most people thought. I thought he was outridden by a much younger jockey in Joey Sheridan that day, who kept him in a pocket. But normally Frankie's got the horse underneath him to get him out of trouble. And Stradivarius is a much trickier ride than you'd think watching Frankie win on him on a regular basis. He does need a little bit of cover. He wants to be produced at the last moment. And Frankie's done such a good job of that over the years that we've kind of taken it for granted that Stradivarius is actually pretty straightforward, and he's not. And it's not going to be easy in a small field for him either, because he does need a bit of cover. He needs to be produced, as we said, with perfect timing. And I thought, you know, even when he got out of trouble in the Gold Cup, he was never going to catch Subjectivist. But if you ignore Subjectivist and look at the Gold Cup as a race between the next 3 home, he wasn't really making inroads on the second and third, really. I mean, he did briefly, but he you know, you wouldn't have. Stradivarius of 12 or 24 months ago would have picked them up, and he didn't look capable of doing it this time around. The ground is in his favour in theory. John Gosden has said on multiple occasions that he doesn't want soft ground, but his career best performance came on soft ground in the Gold Cup last year. So I'm not a massive fan that this fast ground will see a turnaround. Obviously, it was firm. It turned very firm at Ascot for the Gold Cup. So no excuses for him there really on that score either. He's still got a decent chance of winning this, and I don't think Trueshan will run. We're in exactly the same situation as we were with the Gold Cup. Alan King has been at pains to say that he must have softish ground. In my view, I think Trueshan will be okay on good ground, but I think if Kingy walks the track today, he will consider the ground to be good to firm. And if he thinks it's good to firm, we don't have any rain overnight. And you know, there are possible showers today and tomorrow, but they could be very light or non-existent. And if there isn't appreciable rain, I think Kingy will take Trueshan out, which will make Stradivarius a very short price. And to be honest, the more I look at this race, the more I think Spanish Mission is you know, the obvious bet. He was no match for Stradivarius last year, but Spanish Mission is a horse who does need quick ground. Probably doesn't stay 2.5 miles, but 2 miles is ideal for him. And with Stradivarius just on the downgrade, and Spanish Mission seeming at his peak, I think he's got a very good chance here. Stratum wants softer ground as well. The Grand Vizier is a lovely horse who needs further and isn't quite up to this class. He might outrun his odds, but you can't see him winning it. So I think Spanish Mission's an obvious bet here. Obviously, a friend of mine backed Spanish Mission, Andy Post, 3 places at 7-2, which was stealing money, I think. Although I thought that about Alpinista and the Yorkshire Oaks, so it pans out for some of us and not for others. Yeah, getting 3 places on a horse like that looks like, you know, because it looks like it's going to be a 4-runner race. So you'd be hard pressed to lose on a bet like that. But yeah, with questions over Stradivarius, and a strong possibility that Trueshan doesn't run, you're not getting the fancy prices about Spanish Mission, but I'd much rather have him than anything else in the race.
Spanish Mission, a general 3-1 shot across the board for Rory. What about yourself, Andy? Are you with or against Stradivarius?
I think the one thing that Roy probably didn't touch upon there is now Trueshan's likely to be out, which I'm in agreement with, is where's the pace going to come from here? All four of these horses here, by and large, want to be held up. I've gone back through the career history of Stradivarius, and he did make the run in at Doncaster in 2019, and I've got a sneaky feeling this is how this race is going to pan out. I think Frankie's going to try and dictate matters from the front. He'll go quite slowly, I'd imagine, and then he'll use that turn of foot that Stradivarius has got, probably from somewhere turning for home between the 3 and the 4. So he's going to try and catch the other 3 with their trousers down, for want of a better phrase. Spanish Mission, I think, at this moment in his career, is probably the more upwardly mobile of the 2. I think that's definitely panned out at Ascot when he beat Stradivarius fair and square. But that was off the back of a healthy pace. And that's what Spanish Mission, to all intents and purposes, wants. He wants to be held up, coming off a strong pace, on fast ground, galloping track and coming through towards the end. I don't think this race is necessarily going to be run to suit him. I can certainly make a case for him, of course, because I think if this was an evenly run race like it was at Ascot, I would probably back him as well at the odds. But because of the vagaries of how it might be run, and I'm only guessing what might happen, it makes it difficult to have a right proper crack at the race. Ultimately, with Trueshan out, I'm not interested in a betting medium because I just think Trueshan's the best in this division by a mile. And he'll definitely win at Ascot later on in the season when he gets his soft ground. But for now, with him out, it's a bit of a puzzle. But yeah, I think that, like I said, I think Stradivarius will go from the front, and he'll certainly give his supporters every chance of winning this time.
Do you feel this is his last season, Andy?
Yeah, I think so. You know, the fact that they didn't run him at Goodwood, they're trying to wrap him in cotton wool now. They know that he's only probably got 1 or 2 races to peak now, and they don't want to risk him in races that are unnecessary because he's done them so proud over the years. So this is probably his final hurrah, really. This is the race that he's got to win because I think it'd be all guns blazing in this race. Because if it was soft ground at Ascot later in the season, they probably might think, well, it's his last chance. We'll run him because that'll be it. Mm-hmm. But the likelihood is he won't have his ground that day, whereas tomorrow he will.
I think there's half a chance he might be retired. If he does win, then he might be retired on the spot.
Yeah, on the spot. Yeah. Or get beat, it could retire him.
Well, this is true as well. Yeah. I think his owner will want to be able to announce his retirement in front of a race crowd and in front of the TV cameras.
Yeah.
Because the horse has been so important on the staying scene for years, but also particularly to Bjorn Nielsen. So rather than saying, when the ground turns up soft at Ascot in October and going, he's not going to run and we'll make a decision about next year during the winter, and then he just sort of disappears. I think he will want to say, ideally he wants to say, here he is going out in a high, and basically parade him in front of the people and say, thank you for your support, rather than just letting it slip away through the winter. So it'll be interesting to see. And they don't want him to go out on a defeat either. So you might be right that they decide that it's all or nothing tomorrow and try to nick the race from the front. And if they do, they might see that as an opportunity to say so long and thanks for all the fish, to coin a phrase.
Okay, well, that's the Weatherbys Hamilton Lonsdale Cup at 2:25. Don't miss that. It could indeed be Stradivarius' swan song. So no bet for Andy in this, but Rory's pretty confident in Spanish Mission at around the 3-1 mark for William Buick and Andrew Balding. We then move on. £150,000 contest at 3 o'clock is the Basti Equiworld Dubai Gimcrack Stakes. We've got a favourite at the moment is Lusail for Pat Dobbs and Richard Hannon around the 9-4 mark, but it is as short as 15-8 with Betfair. So do make sure that you are looking at the odds checker app and shopping around. Berkshire Shadow is 7-2 for Oisin Murphy and Andrew Balding. Fearby is a 6-1 shot. Vintage Clarets is 7-1. Orazio is 12-1. Eldrick Jones is a 14-1 shot, and Giza Sub is 16-1, and it's about 16-18-1 bar the rest. Just on this race, we'll start with you, Andy. Who do you fancy in the Gimcrack?
I've been a big fan of Lusail all season. He impressed when he won here at York on his debut back in May, I mean, he set off 28-1 that day, which, looking back in hindsight, was probably the bet of the century, wasn't it? If you knew how good he was going to be further down the line. But in keeping with how races pan out at York, you needed to be down the middle during that early part of the season. And the fact that he managed to row his own boat on the wing up the stand side rail and still managed to be victorious is commendable to his ability. His only modest race came next time out at Pontefract on soft ground behind Angel Blue. Obviously revels in those conditions. He went to Newmarket and won under a penalty next time out, stretching out over 7 furlongs. And then he went to the July Stakes, and it's that race that I want to concentrate on, really, because I think it's that race that gives him a form edge on this field. He beat the best collection of 2-year-olds we've seen so far this season. You know, you got Royal Ascot winners in there. Horses that ran well at Royal Ascot, Edric Jones, Dig 2, Project Dante. They went a Herculean pace, and Lucille was up with the speed all the way on the sharp end, right down the middle of the track. So it theoretically should have suited the horses coming off the speed, like Asymmetric and Redborough River. But he rallied again once he was headed, and he hit the line very strong, clocked an amazing time figure, still the best time figure that we've got so far this season from a juvenile. And the form has worked out accordingly. Asymmetric, the second, has won since. Redborough River won a Group 1 next time. It's just a superb piece of form. And he goes back to York, and he's the only course and distance win. I think he's probably nearly the only horse that's in this field that's run at York, let alone won there. I can't recall any of these horses that running at York before. Maybe there might be the odd one or two, but I think I'm pretty sure that there might be only one other. So he does tick a lot of boxes to coin a phrase. He's drawn nicely in 7. I don't mind that draw either. And I think it's probably, in hindsight, a bit of benefit to him that he didn't go to Goodwood in the Vintage Stakes and have a hard race on soft ground, and he comes here relatively fresh, whereas Berkshire Shadow did have a hard race. So I think his form is better than Berkshire Shadow's, and I think he's the right favourite, and hopefully he'll win.
Lucille for Andy at general 9-4 shot with the likes of Bet365, Sky Bet, Bet Victor, Betfred, Betway, and Ball Sports. What about yourself, Rory?
Yeah, I'd largely agree with that. We discussed the sale when we were looking at Goodwood and his chances there. Yeah, the July Stakes has worked out really well. Lucille will be very happy on the ground. As his best performance came at the quickest ground he's raced on so far, and he's clearly well suited by it. And yeah, with the fact that he's beaten Group 1 winners in that race, suggests he's quite overpriced at 9-4. I don't see him going off at that. I think I can see him being a 6-4 shot. 9-4 is a surprising price. I mean, the only negative I would say, I thought there was a bias to those who raced towards the centre of the track at Newmarket that day. But the problem, of course, with putting that forward is that a couple of those have come forward and run really well in group races since anyway. So even if those who raced on the rail were at a disadvantage, the form book suggests that they wouldn't have got involved anyway, even if they were all racing on the same part of the track. So there's not much to knock Lucille for at all. He's very like his sire, who of course only raced at 2, was very tough. And Lucille seems cut from the same cloth. He just seems, 6 months ahead of these in terms of development, doesn't he? And I think that's going to make him hard to beat. A few of these I think are flattered by running in races that suited them ideally. Fearby was won by 5 lengths in the Dragon Stakes at Sandown. He was really helped by an overly strong pace there, and came home much better than the others. Now he's a good horse, but he's not quite as good as that suggests, because it was a perfect scenario for him against the others. He ran well at Goodwood last time out, but I think that's give you an indication that the margin of his win in a listed race was a little bit flattering to him. Similarly to the 3 who ran in the Coventry. The Coventry was run ridiculously fast, and the first 3 home came from well off the pace. And they all run here again. Berkshire Shadow, Eldrick Jones, and Vintage Clarets. They've all been beaten since. Berkshire Shadow is still a decent horse, but he's drawn and stalled 11 of 11, which I think is a bad place to be. And I don't think he's a particularly fast 6 furlong horse. I think he's a 7 furlong horse. This is not going to be the ideal race for him. He's the best of them anyway. Eldrick Jones was badly drawn at Newmarket and then badly hampered at Goodwood. And he could run a bit better. You could argue there's a little bit of value in him because he's not had the run of things in his last 2 races. But I think you're looking at place money for him. And Vintage Clarets, I think he's pretty exposed now. He was well beaten in the Super Sprint. You can make some excuses for him on that occasion, but again, I thought he was very experienced coming into the Coventry, and he was very well suited by the way the race was run. So I think there's no improvement to come from him. The one horse I thought who might run well for a long way here, although he needs to improve, is Giza Sub, who I think will get the run of things, because a lot of these are strong stayers at 6 furlongs, whereas Giza Sub is very fast. They got the tactics badly wrong with him at Goodwood. I don't know why they didn't go to the front with him at Goodwood, because he's all speed. And that ended up, the Richmond ended up being a really messy race where everyone thought Giza Sub was going to lead, and they all ended up kind of in a heap. There were hard luck stories there. He'll be better back in quick ground. He's run at York. He was a close second on his debut. So he handles the track. He improved to win at Pontefract on his second start, and I think he'll be suited by the relative test of speed that this race will be. So I think he's the place value in the race, Giza Sub. But while I might have tried to get away from the favourite had he been sort of an 11-8, 6-4 shot, at 9-4, I can't let Lucille go. I think he's the obvious bet in the race.
9-4, Lucille, the pick for Rory, but he also gives a good mention to Giza Sub, who is as big as 20-1 with Bet365. Andy, you also seem confident on Lucille, but is there anything else at the price that captures your attention at all?
I quite like Orazio as a horse. I thought that performance at Derby last time out was very eye-catching. It was only his second start in his career, and he was well fancied that day, but he's just raced away from where he needs to be. I kind of marked him up on that performance. I think he's going the right way. I could see him running well, but his form is nowhere near as good as Lucille's. I'd almost go as far as to say Lucille at the prices is probably the bet. Probably the bet of all the 4 days for me. He's just a complete box ticker, isn't he? You can't fault him in any way. Time figures, track form, ground,
draw.
He's just got everything you look for in a bet, a solid bet at that price. I've just done another little quarter of an hour podcast with a good friend of mine as well. I just wanted my thoughts on tomorrow and Saturday, and I actually said exactly the same as Roy. I said I thought he'd be south of 2-1. I'm surprised that he's available back at 9-4.
Okay, interesting. And he's just drifted out to 5-2 with William Hill. So if you're going to snap up, get on now. But Lucille, a very confident selection for both the chaps here in the Gimcrack. We then move on to the feature race today, and it is an absolute cracker. It's the Coolmore, Wootton, Bassett, Nunthorpe Stakes, over 5 furlongs. A brilliant field of 15 go to post for this event, and they're headed at 9-4 by Golden Pal for Frankie Dettori and American trainer Wesley Ward. We've then got Suesa 11-4 for Francois Rojo, 11-2 for Winter Power, 6-1 Dragon Symbol, 14-1 Liberty Beach, Mosgill and Kayamoro, and it's then 20-1 bar. But Frankie Dettori jetted into York early this week via helicopter to just have a little gallop on Golden Pal. He said he moved like a gazelle on the Knaves mile. But Andy, coming to you first, what do you think about firstly this American Raider and whether he deserves to be the 9-4 favourite for the Nunthorpe?
This is just going to be a great race to watch, isn't it? And it's going to be blinking you'll miss it. Was it 56 seconds in and around that mark to run it? Could be, verging on track record territory here. The one thing to say before we get onto the horses individually, including Golden Pal, is there's going to be an absolute shed load of pace on, isn't there? Winter Power, Kayamoro, Liberty Beach, Golden Pal himself, of course, Dakota Gold, Bedford Flyer, all drawn from different parts of the track as well. So they're going to go hurtling along the Knaves Mile for the first 3 furlongs. That pace has obviously got to collapse at some stage. You won't get a luxury where horses are going to be able to just dictate and do their own thing. And I think that might just count against Winter Power, because when she's ended up winning, it's by and large when she's got an uncontested lead and been able to get some kind of a breather in and then kick again. But the day that she was taken on at Ascot in the King's Stand, she felt quite to see it out. And I can see that happening again. I just can't see her lasting all the way. Interestingly, including Golden Pal, who's a very eye-catching runner, he's drawn his stall 1, and the favourite Suesa has drawn 14. So you've got 1 on either side there. So one of them is going to be in the disadvantageous position. On the evidence of day one, you'd say Golden Pal and Suesa has got a better draw than Suesa. Plus, Suesa probably wants a little bit of ease in the ground as well, perhaps a lot of ease in the ground. So at 9-4, 5-2, I'd want to be taking on Suesa under these circumstances. I think this race could set up for a closer or a bit of a shock result. I think there's a potential here for something to do something that it hasn't done before, or just outrun its odds. I do think the 2-year-old Chipotle is an interesting runner at 40-1. He's got the cheek pieces on for the first time, which might just help him. He's running the super sprint can be cast aside because he got badly hampered when he was coming through what looked a potent challenge. He hated the soft ground at Goodwood, which, on the evidence of what we saw at Sandown earlier in the season, was always going to happen. But
surprised they ran him there.
Yeah, absolutely, Rory. Yeah, I totally agree. But either side of that, his 3 wins on genuine good to firm ground have been extraordinary. The day when he won at Goodwood, he won the Windsor Castle. If you compare the 3 5-furlong sprint races on day 1 and day 2, there were the King's Stand, the Windsor Castle, and the Queen Mary. His closing sectional of 34-2 was better than Oxtead's 34-5 and Quick Susie's 35 dead. So if you look at him, I know obviously Oxtead was day 1 and his own race, the Windsor Castle, was day 2, but there wouldn't have been that amount of difference between the ground because there wasn't any watering going on. It still shows you just how the level he ran to that day and compared to the older horse race, the King's Stand. The time figures were comparable as well, the overall time figures. So the fact that Chipotle now comes back here on firm ground and he's receiving £1 stone and £8 off the older horses suggests that he's no 40-1 shot, and he's drawn right in the middle as well. So clearly, the faster they go, the better his chances, and so he's definitely been overlooked as far as I can see. And a couple of others as well at price as well. I think Moss Gill's a player. His form figures here at the York are absolutely extraordinary. I think he's never finished out the first 3, including being placed in this race before. The day when he finished second to Winter Power got a freebie in front, and he ran on strongly to finish second. But with Winter Power likely be taken on, I don't think she'll have the luxury of being able to just boss the race and do what she did that day. So I think Moss Gill at 20-1 is a big play, given away this race is likely to be run, and he's likely to be coming through strongly. And I'd also throw in Emirati Anna at a big price as well. He looked a different character when held up last time out at York in a fast time, at Hamilton in a fast time. So I'm looking at horses currently at 40-1, 20-1, and 40-1. And I don't think these races, I think Rory will agree, there's a great deal between first and last or first and 6th and 7th. You'll probably get the first 8 home here covered by no more than a length and a half. Nothing's going to win it by a wide margin. It'll be where you're drawn, who's in front when the music stops. You get funny results in this race. Whereas the milers, the mile and quarter, mile and a half races, the class can really tell, and you get a misriff kind of performance where they win by 6 lengths, just because they're over that trip, their dominance is even more apparent. But I think in these races, there's fine margins with the difference between winning and losing. So I think you can get plenty of potential for a shock. So I'm more than happy to play at big odds here. Emirati Anna, Moss Chipotle. I'll probably have a fiddle around with those 3 at big prices, 3-4 places each way. I'll be disappointed if I don't get at least one in the frame there with that lot.
Chipotle bidding one of the first 2-year-olds since Kingsgate native in 2007 to win the Nunthorpe. Generally available, as Andy says, at 40-1. Emirati Anna, another 40-1 shot. And if you're going to back Moss Gill, 20-1 with Bet365, but 16 across the board. So Bet365, the biggest price there. What about yourself, Rory? It's a fascinating contest. Who do you fancy to win the Nunthorpe?
Yeah, I just want to underline a couple of things that Andy said there. You never be afraid of backing one at a big price in this particular race with a big field, because it's not about raw ability. It's about having the race run to suit you. And Andy's made a very good point. There's some very speedy horses in here, but most of them want to dominate. And if they can't dominate, then they could fall in a hole. I mean, look at, Batash is the best 5-furlong horse we've seen in 20 or 30 years, and he managed to get himself beaten in this race a couple of times. So it's always possible if things don't pan out for you. And I think Andy's got a good point about the the gap between top and bottom, particularly when some of these horses have standout performances when they've been able to blaze. And that's probably true of Golden Pal as much as anything. Whether stall 1 is a good place to be or not, I don't know. I would say I don't mind being drawn low, but being drawn lowest of all could be a little bit tricky there unless Frankie's able to bounce them straight out and come across a little bit. You don't want to be stuck on a wing, especially when your main danger is on the other side of the track. And Frankie's been blindsided in this race before. Of course, he won't forget that in a hurry. And the question with Golden Pal is how good is he? He's been hyped to the skies. But it's impossible, it's impossible for us from a European perspective to watch his US races and come to the conclusion that he's, somehow the best we've seen. He was an easy winner at Saratoga last time out, but I don't think he was finishing particularly strongly there. I mean, he left the others for dead, but they all seem to be stopping in behind him that day rather than seeing it out. And he was eased close home, but how. That performance, I mean, a time form give him an adjusted rating of 120 for that, which puts him behind half the field. So you've got to adjust it upwards and say, well, he had loads in hand. So they've given him an £8 adjustment for that performance. We were told he was a superstar at Ascot last year, and he's beaten by the Learjet. And the Learjet's not won since. So it's difficult to know. As I said, the reputation's always been there, but mostly with Wes Ward's horses. When they've come with big reputations, they've immediately won, and then they've carried that forward with them. With Golden Pal, he's done his winning in the States. He's looked good, but it's difficult to say exactly how good he is in European terms. And I think he's a difficult horse to back at a short price because had you had an identical race 20 years ago, he'd have been 16-1. Because people would look at the US form, try to put a figure on it and say, well, he's got a bit to find, and American horses coming over to the UK, you can't really fancy them. But because we're now led entirely by sound bites and by media expectation, and everyone falls over themselves and Wes Ward will talk to whoever wants to talk to him, and he give a very good interview. We've heard nothing but Golden Pal for months. Yeah. So he might be the real deal, but we're basing his brilliance on what we're told about him, not what we've seen of him.
They never work badly in a solo trial either, as well, do they?
No, they don't, do they? So, I mean, he could win this. If anything's going to win it by 4 or 5 lengths, it's probably him. But I'm not going to back him to do it, not at the price he is. One thing to say about Suesa, her form suggests she wants softer ground, but her connections are adamant she wants good ground. When she came over to Ascot, they were expecting good ground. Of course, it was firm on the Friday and then heavy on the Saturday. They weren't expecting that, and they thought that's what got her beaten. So I should say that although she doesn't have a huge amount of form on quick ground, they think she'll handle quick ground at least as well as she handles soft. So that's just worth bearing in mind. Whether stall 14 is a good place to be, again, she's right on that other wing. Not ideal for me. And I thought they really set things up for her at Goodwood. She was impressive winning that by 3 lengths. But they all seemed determined to get each other beaten in that race. I thought there was some poor jockeyship going on. It was a bizarre race to watch. We all knew you wanted to be near the stands rail, and everyone was just desperately trying to get away from it. And she was the one who came through. You could have driven 3 buses through where she came with her run. And although she was very impressive, it's difficult to put a figure on that. In terms of the time figure, very moderate. But there were difficult conditions to do that. And obviously the race was run at a bit of a crawl for a 5 furlong sprint. I think it's difficult to be absolutely adamant about what she achieved. Again, she could be exceptionally good, and she's got a big reputation, but you're taking a little bit of trust with her. Winter Par, I do like. I like Winter Par. I put her up at Ascot, but you were absolutely spot on when you spoke about her at Ascot, Andy, and you said that blazing off at York is one thing, blazing off at Ascot is a different thing altogether. And she went far too fast. And I thought she came in for a bad ride at Ascot from Sylvester de Souza, who's been so good over the years. But he went so there was no way she was going to see that out, the way the speed she went, and all those who were on the front end struggled at the end of that contest. You might be right that she needs to dominate. I just think she needs a speed favouring track, and I think she can cope well enough with that. So I'd give her a chance. Although my worry would be the same if Golden Pal bounces out in front from stall 1 and Sylvester de Souza thinks I'm not going to let you lead, and they get into a war, then that's liable to set it up for a finisher as well. So that's a little bit of a concern, but I'd still be positive about Winter Par. I think a few of these just went further than 5 furlongs. Dragon Symbol ran really well at Goodwood and was a little bit unlucky in that he was carried a long way across the track. I don't think Oisin Murphy ended up on the far side through his own choice. But yeah, that he should have been drawn ideally at Goodwood to win. But he stays 6 furlongs really strongly. And as we've seen over the years, there's a massive difference between a really fast 5 at York and a stiff 6 at Ascot. So I'm a little concerned about how he'll cope with that. You say the same thing for one or two others. Rohan, I don't think he's going to cope with 5 furlongs at York. He's a lovely horse, but it's not the ideal scenario for him. Again, he's a horse to be interested in when he goes to Ascot at the end of the season. When people see a row of duck eggs against his name, he'll be bouncing back when he runs at Ascot. I thought Emiratiana had each way claims. Again, he doesn't want to get in. He's often ridden forward in his races, but he might be seen to better effect just sitting off the pace because they're going to go very fast here. And although, you know, you look through his form and you see that, you know, at 6 furlongs, he's a fair way behind the very best. But the 5 furlong races suit him a little bit better. And he's a pretty solid candidate. So I can see, again, he's not good enough to win this race unless everything falls his way. But I could see him hitting the frame. So that's the one I'd agree with Andy with in terms of the each way bets. He'd be my outsider for the race. But although I do have slight misgivings, I think Winter Power is just very, very good on quick ground at York. And I'll take a chance that she doesn't get involved in or that even if she does get involved in a bit of a war, she'll see it out a lot better here than she did at Ascot. And I suppose the one I should mention, Chill in the same colours. She's improving all the time, and I can see her being suited by a really strong pace. Again, the concern with her is that she stays a stiff 6 furlongs really well. So while she'll be doing a good late work here, I think it'll probably be too little too late. So to sum that up, I'll chance Winter Power at the prices, but Emiratiana each way is tempting.
So Winter Power 11-2 for Sylvester Sousa, and we've also got Emiratiana at around 40-1 mark. Interesting final thing, Andy, on Emiratiana. Obviously, was very impressive at Hamilton last time out, and Kay Amoro, who is 14-1 with Paddy Power. I know she's second in the race last year to Batash, but she's, you know, double the price essentially of Emiratiana. Is that just based on the fact that the Nunthorpe, if you've run well in the race or you've run well at York before, it's a track that you can run well at again, if you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think with Emiratiana, with Keamora, I think she comes into this race this year not quite in the same nick as she did 12 months ago. I know we had different timescales and you know, we didn't start racing until June, but what I've seen of her so far this season, she's a little bit below par. I think that's born out of the fact that she was down the field in that York race. She runs York incredibly well. But she was second favourite in that race that Winter Power won early on in the season, actually only a month ago, and she showed nothing that day. She got battered by Emiratiana last time out at Hamilton. I can't see her turn. I know it's York, but I can't see her turning the form around with Emiratiana. And I can't for the life of me understand why there's such a massive discrepancy in the prices.
I think last year's Nunthorpe was a very odd race, a small field, obviously, and you also had a very strong side wind as well. And that race just broke in half very quickly after the start, and those who were held up had no chance. And Kay Moro just had everything go her way. She had the wind to help her. She managed to get that lead, and she forced Batash to work really hard to get to her. But it flatters her massively. She's a really likable mare, but that one run is not indicative of her overall form.
Yeah, I mean, it's not impossible Keamore could run well. It's Michael Dodds. It's, you know, he's turned around the fortunes in some horses who seemingly haven't got strong form when it counts most. But yeah, I'd soon be on a Emiratiana.
And just a final question, Rory, on Golden Pal. Is there a chance that, you know, obviously he's coming from America, running around turns, bends? I know he's run at Ascot before. Could everything happen too quickly for him in this race?
I don't think so, because he appears to be exceptionally fast over the first few furlongs of a race. And the way that Wes Ward trains them, they're never lacking in the early, you know, in the first half of the race, they'd be very comfortable. From what I've seen, those Wes Ward horses who are just below the very top, their weakness is if they don't get away and have the race won at halfway, they're very vulnerable in the last furlong of a race. So that I'd be more concerned about how he finishes this race than how he starts it. I think he should be in the lead or close to the lead early on, and it's just a case of how he sees it out. And he's just impossible to weigh up. I'm not suggesting that he's a bad horse here. I'm just suggesting that his price is a product of all the talk about him. And his American form might be really good, but it's hard for us to weigh up. And of course, 2-year-old form is irrelevant when you come to a race like the Nunthorpe. You need to prove how well you've trained on. And he's got one win in what was a fairly weakly contested Grade 3. So he's hard to weigh up. But the market says that he's proven, and he's not really.
Brilliant. Interesting thoughts from both the guys on the Nunthorpe. So it's Winter Power 11-2 for Rory, along with Emiratiana at 40-1. And it's a triumvirate for Andy Holden with Emiratiana at 40-1, Chipotle at 40-1, and also, what's the one you said, Andy? Moss Gill at 20. Yeah. But obviously available at 14-1 with the likes of Paddy Power Betfair. So do make sure you shop around with Bet365 offering 20-1 about Moss Gill. A brilliant race in prospects.
Sorry, Daniel. Yeah, it'll be a difficult 24 hours for me now to try and work out which of those three to drop come my column tomorrow, because I don't mind putting two each way when the odds are favourable and the place terms are favourable. But putting three up, I don't think I've ever done that. Well, I've never done that before.
You'll have to do the exotics, Andy.
I might have to, but yeah, one of them will definitely get dropped. But because I don't know which one it is, I suppose it depends if the prices hold up between in the morning.
Make sure you read Andy's column to check who he's put on the subs bench in the Nunthorpe. We're moving back then, chaps, to the 150, the Sky Bet Handicap, which is the opener of the card on Friday. Nearly 1 mile and 4 furlongs to trip. You've got the likes of, at 7-1, My Frankel is towards the top of the betting, but the favourite at 9-2 is for Her Majesty the Queen, the ultra progressive Wink of an Eye for David Egan and William Haggas. 7-1 for My Frankel, 8-1 for the top weight Johnny Drama, and then you've got a number of horses at 10-1, including Midnight's Legacy and Strawberry Rock, along with State of Bliss. And at 12-1, you've got Scarlet Dragon, Throne Hall, Winter Reprise, Rhythmic Intent, Dark Jedi and Sam Cook, and then it's 14-1 bar. This looks ultra competitive, chaps. Andy, start with you. Obviously, Wink of an Eye was given a great ride by Ryan Moore at Goodwood last time out. Can he complete the 5-timer in this event?
Yeah, it was a race that I had to watch through gritty teeth the day after when I was doing my replays, because I put up Ziggy in that race, and how he didn't win, I do not know. So, obviously Wink of an Eye won it, but to my eyes, he wasn't the best horse in the race, but that's taking nothing away from him, because he's still a progressive 3-year-old that he's clearly worthy of the utmost respect. I do like 3-year-olds by and large in these older horse handicaps, but York, as we saw yesterday with the Copper Night race, has a habit of patting the older horses on the back and complimenting them just as much. So I'd be more keen on something that is a little bit more weather beaten in a race of this nature. I'd probably go with Dark Jedi here. He's run quite well here before, but and they tried him. He's by and large been really good over 1.5 miles, but they did try him over 1.6 miles last time out at Musselburgh, and they rode him for the trip. He just didn't get home. He travelled up really well, 2 out, and in the end, the two strongest stays just outrunning Wise Eagle and Bodyline, 2 strong stays at the trip. But it wasn't a bad run by any stretch of the imagination. Prior to that, he'd won in a fast time at Ripon, beating a 3-year-old, Rosanna Bad. So I think he's got the right profile to run well here. He's available at around about 16-1. He hasn't got a bad draw. He's somewhere in the middle, isn't he? Around 10. But he's got some really, really healthy time figures next to his name on our sheet anyway, and that suggests to me when they do go quick over 1.5 miles, he's likely to be more suited to that test than others. So yeah, I think I'll stick with a tried and trusted older horse here with Dark Jedi.
Dark Jedi 16-1 with both Bet365 and BetVictor on the oddschecker app. What about yourself, Rory?
I was inclined to go down the same sort of angle. I looked at previous results of this race, and the last 8 winners of this have been 4-year-olds, which rather put me off looking at the older horses. And you've only got 2 horses older than 4 winning this since 2006.
What about 3-year-olds?
Well, there've been no 3-year-old winners since 2009. I don't know how many 3-year-olds have been in the race.
Right. Yeah.
To be honest, because obviously you've got the Melrose, which would be attract a lot of the 3-year-old stayers. So Whispering Gallery won in 2009, London Express in 2006. Both of those for Mark Johnson. So if you find a Mark Johnson 3-year-old in the race, you'd certainly sit up and take notice. And you've got one there in State of Bliss, who was obviously beaten by Wink of an Eye at Goodwood, but then has won really well at Ascot since, which of course means that he's £8 higher than Goodwood, whereas Wink of an Eye is only £4 higher. So he's £4 worse off for getting beaten by Wink of an Eye. So his claims on that basis are a little forlorn is definitely the wrong word. It's a little bit tricky to argue that he should beat Wink of an Eye again, but I think if you took Wink of an Eye out of the race, State of Bliss would look very attractive here, because he's got that typically progressive Mark Johnson profile. He handles quick ground. He's produced a career best performance on his latest start. He's just blossoming at the right time. So if we didn't have that particular form line, I think State of Bliss would be a shorter price. He's drawn out in stall 18, but I'm not worried about over 1.5 miles at York. First of all, the position of the stalls over 1.5 miles. The stalls are in the centre rather than on the rail, so there's no great advantage for the low drawn horses being on a rail. They're not. They tend to get pushed across a little bit, and obviously you've got a lot longer until the bend. There's a long run until the first bend over 1.5 miles, and the draw should not be an issue, particularly with a horse who can go forward like State of Bliss can. And he's shown himself to be capable of running in different ways. He's made the running and gone close before. He made most of the running when he was just touched off at Goodwood, and then he was held up when he wanted to ask it last time out. So that was obviously when Nicola Curry rode. That was her first ride for Mark Johnson, first winner in the Shergar Cup. Some people will maybe take that form with a pinch of salt because it's the Shergar Cup, as if it's some kind of novelty event. But in terms of the form book, there's no reason why you shouldn't take Shergar Cup form seriously. So while he needs to take another step forward to win, I think he's got the right profile for it. So I would go each way with State of Bliss here, because he's a double figure price. Whereas, Wink of an Eye is going to be about 4 to 1 or 9 to 2, and State of Bliss is going to be 10 or 11 to 1. So I'd be happy to back him each way. And even if Wink of an Eye is able to confirm that form. And of course, Wink of an Eye not absolutely proven at the trip. You'd expect him to stay. Given that he got the 11 furlongs pretty well at Goodwood and softish ground, but they're sometimes surprising. So even if Wink of an Eye it keeps going forward and wins the race, you're still getting a bit of place value about State of Bliss.
So State of Bliss, a 10 to 1 shot for Rory, with Paddy Power, Betfair and Bet Victor, whilst it's Dark Jedi for Andy, who is 16 to 1 with both Bet365 and Bet Victor. The final two races on Friday, we've got the EBF Fillies Handicap at 4:40, and then finally the Sky Bet Mile Handicap at 5:10 p.m. Rory, we'll start with you. Anything that makes appeal in either of those races?
Not in the Fillies Handicap at all. I find that I do not like assessing 3-year-old fillies in sort of handicaps or even listed races. I think they're awful races to look at. No offense to those who are running them. They're just very difficult from someone who likes to use the form book to find winners. That tends to be a tool that doesn't work quite so well.
You sounded like Graham Taylor there back in the day, didn't you? Do I not like?
Do I not like Fillies
handicaps?
The concluding race is quite an interesting one. The Sky Bet Mile Handicap, where again, if there is going to be a draw bias here, you tend not to do so well drawn very wide over a mile. I wouldn't say you can't win from there, but where I'm saying that over 1.5 miles and further, high draws can do really well. 7 furlongs in a mile, you do tend to want to be drawn low to mid. There tends to be an advantage there. I don't want to be drawn really low either, though. I think horses who are drawn right on the inside can sometimes struggle. The strike rate of stall 1, for example, tends to be lower than say 3 or 4. I quite like the chance of King Triton. He's having his first run for Grant Schuer. He was a winner on his third start for Roger Varian. An interesting purchase for a yard that can do no wrong this season. I think Grant Schuer must have the highest handicap strike rate in the country, mustn't he, this year? And he really, I saw an interview with him yesterday where he was talking about going home and looking at the sectionals for a race of one of his horses had run in. And you hardly ever hear a trainer talking about analysing races after the event. So he clearly does his homework, Grant. And the results this season have been absolutely spectacular. So King Triton, a mark of 85 seems very fair for him starting out. And while 3 or 4 years ago, a move from Roger Varian to Grant Tour would look like a big negative, don't think it is now. And I think he's an interesting one at a double figure price. He's about 12 to 1, which I thought was tempting.
King Triton 12 to 1 across the board for Rory in the finale, the 5:10. What about yourself, Andy? Anything in the 4:40 or 5:10?
Yeah, I quite like one in the last race. He's a horse I've warmed to in the last couple of starts. Djami Passo from the Andrew Baldwin stable, the informed, rampant Andrew Baldwin stable, and Oisin Murphy on. That's a team or a marriage made in heaven, isn't it, this season? But since they've ridden him differently and dropped him back in trip, he's really blossomed. They ran him in that, I think it was a London Gold Cup, wasn't it, early on in the season at Newbury Race, which is always traditionally a good form line for the rest of the season for 3-year-olds. But they made the running with him that day, and that just was never going to happen. But it was him alone who made sure that time figure for Bay Bridge was absolutely off the charts. I think actually Bay Bridge off the back of that was favourite to win at Royal Ascot until a late injury scare kept him off the track, and he hasn't been seen since. And that form has worked out particularly well subsequently. But then they dropped him down in trip and dropped him in at Sandown, and he was a much better conveyance when he beat King of Clubs, who went on to run well at Newmarket next time out. And then he came here to York again. I'm flying the flag for the York form, winning that female jockeys race the other day. And Hayley Turner never had to twitch on him that day. I mean, he literally went through the race on the bridle, and he won by 2.5 lengths, but it could have been treble that had he been pushed out to the line. He's clearly come of age just at the right time. Fast ground on the Naysmar, no problem. Dropping back to a mile, I don't think that's going to be an issue. In fact, I think he'll improve for dropping back because he's got such a high cruising speed. He's got a lovely draw as well in stall 6. And most of his market rivals, albeit they're a little sexier, Royal Fleet being one of the major ones, Star of Orion and Aldari being another, are all drawn right on the wing. Royal Fleet, for a horse that pulls very hard and expends a lot of energy, I see the hoods goes on for the first time. Stall 16 of 16 is going to be a nightmare for William Buick because he's going to have to drop him in and for say probably thick end of about 10 lengths or go forward. So I don't think he's a 4-to-1 shot where he's drawn and how he's where he's likely to be at halfway. And the other two, as I said, Aldari and Star of Orion, strong Ascot form, but a lot of that is straight track Ascot form, and it's a different ball game coming here and having to prove yourself on the Naysmar. So Djami Passo has already proved himself here, and I think he's strong. His form lines are just as strong, and he's 12 to 1. I can't work that. I can't work out for the life of me why he's 12 to 1.
So there you go. King Triton for Rory at 12 to 1 with Sky Bet and William Hill, and Djami Passo at 12 to 1 for Sky Bet and William Hill for Andy. So just quickly rounding up, chaps. Obviously, you've already spoke about all the racing in depth, but your best bets of the day, Andy, is it Lascelles for you?
He's the most likely winner, obviously 9 to 4. Obviously, he's not the best. The best bet is obviously something you think's overpriced. So I think Loose Sales only just marginally overpriced, but that's the Satan. You could argue that he should be 2 to 1 or under, but we're splitting hairs there. Whereas I do think Djami Passo at 12, I'd make him a 6-7 to 1 shot. So I think he's double the odds what I think he should be, certainly based on the time figures and what I've seen of him, and his opposition are not drawn well. So yeah, I'd say Djami Passo at the prices is arguably the pick.
Djami Passo in the 5-10, and Rory, yourself?
I think I might take an opportunity of. I agree with Andy. I think Lucille is a crazy price at 5 to 2 for the Gimcrack. That I don't think that's going to last. And you end up looking a bit daft when you talk about what great value a 5 to 2 shot is when it ends up being 6 to 4 across the board. I might go head to head with Andy. He makes a good point about the draw there, but the Djami Passo drawn in stall 6 and King Triton drawn right beside him in stall 7. I quite like this as a matchup. Just to clarify, Ria's handicap, he needs to improve in terms of his speed figures so far, King Triton. But the horse he beat in a novice at Thirsk last time out won a handicap the other day off a mark of 95. Now, he was given £7 away when King Triton beat him 3/4 of a length at Thirsk. But King Triton starts on 85 here, and on the basis of what Motawaja did last time out, 85 is a lenient mark. So I'll take the head-to-head, the same price. They're drawn next to each other. It's a nice little side bet, isn't it?
He's a nice horse, King Triton. I mean, he looks the part, doesn't he, when you see him physically? And he's got good battling qualities. But yeah, you're right. He does, just based on time figures anyway. Overall time figures, he's a little way off some of these at the moment. But that's not suggesting for 1 minute he can't get there.
You don't want to waste your good time figures in your qualifying runs, Andy, as well.
Exactly. Well, he's the hardest horse to assess in the field because of that.
And let's face it, if he was still with Roger Varian, he wouldn't be that price.
No.
And yet he's not a throwout. He cost 100 grand at the sales. So there's no reason why he should be a bigger price because of the stable switch.
Yeah.
Really interesting stuff from both the guys. So 12-1 Djami Passo and 12-1 King Triton, the naps of Rory and Andy. Thanks so much for their time today. I've been your host, Danny Archer. Some really great insight into the Nunthorpe, the Lonsdale Cup, and a number of other fascinating races on day 3 of York. Remember to check the odds checker out for the best prices. Thanks for listening and watching, and we'll see you for day 4, the final preview with the Sky Bet Ebor, the highlight.